Okay, so thank you all so much for joining us. We are going to be talking building relationships with faculty and TAs. I am joined here with Emily, who I have to say is an expert in building relationships with faculty and TAs. And we are really going to be having more of a conversation about how she goes about doing that. I will also say my street cred to add to this is I have been a TA 3 times and I taught a class at the previous college I worked at. So we both have an intimate knowledge of how this works and what the benefits are. So we're going to have a conversation about it. We will then open it up to questions. If you think of a question while we're talking, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. We will be answering those throughout the session. So let's start with, I want to know from the audience, feel free to drop it in the chat. Do you have a favorite faculty member and what was it about them? So this is, I'm assuming it's from where you're transferring from. Did you have a favorite faculty and what did you like about them in particular? Emily, I'm going to kick that question to you first. Favorite faculty and why?
Okay, so for my community college, it would have to be the honors director, Professor Emily Liu. Her name is also Emily. And she was like my mom in community college. I was very involved, so I got really close with her. And she honestly really helped with my UC essays because she's also an English professor. And she was also a UCLA alum. So I was basically being shadowed, like I was like shadowing her and everything. And she honestly completely transformed my experience at a CC because obviously when you go to a community college and especially during COVID, like peak COVID, everything was online. And as someone who thrives being outside and interacting with people, it was a bit hard to be more like energized and more motivated in school. And so by participating in the different events that we had on Zoom, and also once the like mask mandates like lifted to a degree, when we had events on campus, it was like so much fun. And she was amazing, honestly. Like she gave the best advice. And as someone who like panicked over the UC admissions decisions, she really helped calm me down. And yeah, I love her.
I love that. I will share my favorite faculty member just because I can't resist. Mine was Janice Gleim. I went to undergrad at Michigan Tech, where I was an environmental studies major, and she was my botany teacher. I liked her so much. There was just this way she had of explaining things. Her class was very, very challenging. And I think in part that I don't know about y'all, but like I kind of I don't even kind of I enjoy a challenging class when it's a challenging but supportive environment. And I feel like Dr. Gleim perfectly hit that that balance. And I think she also she was just very clearly passionate about plants in a way that made it so easy to like go to class. I ended up TAing for her. And then I ended up taking a doctoral level classes on mosses from her because I liked her so much. And that involved us like legitimately like army crawling through like cemeteries to look for different kinds of mosses. It was a very strange experience, but it was really challenging, lots of microscope time, lots of lab time, and I never saw that for myself. And for me, like having a really great faculty member that was just lit up, like when someone is so enthusiastic to talk about moss or plants or whatever, you just can't help but get sucked into that. If anyone else has a favorite faculty member, feel free to drop it in the chat. Oh my gosh, statistics, Bonnie, that's a hard one to be like to make like so much fun. I absolutely love that example. And so we wanted to start with this because I think for the most part, most people have a favorite faculty member. And if you haven't yet, I hope that you find one at UCLA, because I do think that thinking about what it is about that favorite faculty member, that can be a really great foundation for thinking about how do you build relationships with faculty and staff. So our first point is, and I'll let Emily elaborate on this, but we were talking about it and we both agree this might sound cheesy, but you're paying to be here. You're paying to go to school at UCLA, whether it's through financial aid, grants, directly paying, but your education is an investment. And so it's really important that you go to class, participate, etc. And as someone who is investing in your education, building like relationships with these faculty and TAs can really, really, really help in it, like make your education and your investment in your UCLA experience that much more powerful. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, so that's a really big part. And as someone who cares about money, like I personally like I think about money a lot. So and I don't like wasting money. So going to class, you're not only paying for the class, but the infrastructure too. So take advantage of sitting in those seats that you're paying for. And yeah, like it's, I mean, why pay so much money again if even if you have scholarships and grants just to not attend? So I think that's like a big thing for me. Like I like to use what I'm paying for. It's like paying for a gym membership and then not going in a weird way.
That's really funny. What so tell me more. You and I were talking about um you were telling me about a class you took. Do you want to share the story you had from your, I think it was a psych class, am I right?
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I am not the best test taker. I honestly, I'm smart, but I'm not textbook smart. And so I get really anxious during exams. And I was a pretty average student in high school, and I got my grades up during in community college because everything was online, and there, the exams are very like easy, honestly, because they were all online and you don't have that pressure from being in person. And so coming here, I had to really figure out a way to keep my grades high while also balancing life on top of that. So I it's very simple. You simply just go to class and you go to office hours. Here at UCLA, you have your professor and your TA. Your TA is your teaching assistant. I'm sure all of you guys know what that is, but it's someone who's honestly probably a few years older than you, and they are getting their PhD or they're getting their master's, and they're assisting the professor. And a lot of them do the grading. So sometimes the professors will do the grading, but majority of the time it's your TAs. And a lot of them take into consideration, like if they remember you, they will honestly help you out. And the best way for them to remember you is to simply, the first step is to literally go to class. That's the first step. And then after that, it's going to office hours and asking questions. And if you don't have questions, then you go and get feedback on your assignments or your labs, or if you're interested in the research that they're doing, then you ask them about that. Because at the end of the day, they're also humans. And I mean, it's nice to have conversations with students who are very motivated and have a lot of ambition. So I for me, I knew that like, okay, this material is hard. And if I simply just studied and didn't ask questions, I would not do well. So I put in the effort to go to my professor's office hours and my TA's office hours, because you'll see once you go to discussions after week 2, people will stop showing up. So that's what happened with this one class in Psych 100B. And it's a class that everyone in the psych department has to take. And it's a pretty hard class. It's a lot of information, it's a lot of material, and it's more application based versus like having to memorize vocabulary. It's like you need to put it in, you have to apply the knowledge. And for me, I went to discussions, or I went to lab every single week. And literally after week 2, people stopped showing up, and it was me and like one other person, maybe 2 other people. And that class is supposed to be 30 people in total. So during the midterm and finals, I didn't do too well, but I got a personalized email from my TA at the very end stating that she had fixed all of my lab assignments to 100. So she changed it just so that it would help boost my grade. And she did that because I participated and I showed up to class. Simply that. she was very appreciative of the fact that I took the time to raise my hand and ask questions and actually like just participate. Like I literally didn't put too much effort into it. Like I didn't like go out of my way and like, but I simply just raised my hand and asked the question. Like they really love that. Like they want to see that they're making an impact on someone. And so honestly, like, and this is not the first like situation. Like honestly, this has happened in almost all my classes because I go to office hours all the time. Like I'm always in office hours. Again, not even I don't even have to go to just because of questions, but simply to get feedback. And so I think that's the best thing that you can do is go to office hours and build those connections because they will help you. Like they will honestly help you.
I completely agree with you. And this is, I had a similar kind of experience, but actually on the opposite end. And I wish I had known this earlier in my academic journey, because I think I was definitely someone who was intimidated by office hours. Like, I don't know if anyone else resonates with this, but I was like, what am I going to talk to them about? They're so smart. I'm scared. That's basically my understanding previously. And then I TA'd this core class my senior year of college, and it's a really challenging class. And so my role as a TA was to grade exams as well as to teach lab. And so I'd have to like drive a giant like van out into the woods. It was a forest ecology class. I know it's not a class we have here, sorry. But the part that I didn't understand until the very end of that semester was that yes, semester school, not quarters like UCLA. But there was this student in our class that in a lab meeting of all the leadership, we were discussing like, hey, how come this person isn't turning in their labs? You know, they're so engaged in lab, they ask really great questions. And so they came to office hours and they let the faculty member know that they were having like some personal difficulties at that time. I still don't know actually to this day like what exactly happened, but whatever they shared with the faculty member, there was a stern policy in this class of like, you're not allowed to turn in labs late. This person turned in every single lab for the first 6 weeks late, and the faculty member let them. And it was whatever the conversation was had in office hours. One, they kept that private, which I really respect. I think that is true of faculty members across the board. This ideally is someone that you feel like you can trust, and that if something is going on behind the scenes, like we have all been there. I mean, I personally lost one of my grandparents when I was in college and had to go home for a week. And it was my relationship with faculty members and the fact that I was already going to class, I felt a lot more comfortable reaching out. And it's always nice when you get that message back that's not like, here's all of your academic obligations. It was like, I'm so sorry to hear this. I'm thinking of you at this time, you know, because like Emily said before, faculty are people too. And so you want to make sure that you're building those relationships and assuming that they're going to be accommodating. Of course, there's always faculty members that are very, very, very strict. I think you'll know those when you come across them. But the thing that happened in my lab group was that they let that person turn in their labs late. They ended up getting an A in the class. And then the part that really shocked me was when we did final grades, like we graded all of the exams, we had all the lab reports, we were doing final grades for the grade book, and we sat in a lab meeting with the faculty and all the TAs, and they said, did this person participate in lab? Did they participate in class? You know, this person asked the most questions. They're going to get an A minus. Let's bump them up to an A, and like legitimately just added points to someone's grade. I'm not saying this happens in every single class, but if you have a faculty or a TA that is really values participation highly, or, you know, they would also say things like, this person came to office hours. I saw how hard she tried. I'm going to make sure that her grade reflects that level of effort. I had no idea that that was something that happened behind the scenes. They definitely have conversations, and especially when they see like how hard you're trying and that you're engaging and that you're doing your best in the class, you're more likely to get the benefit of the doubt. And I know that sounds like very like self-serving, but at the same time, like it can really make the difference between like an A minus and an A, or a B plus and an A. Especially in those classes, you know. What did I miss in that, Emily?
I think that because the quarter system, it goes by so fast and there's so many things happening on campus. Like you're not just going to be focused on school. first week here, we have Transferpalooza, we have, we have Club Rush, we have so many things happening. We have first Thursdays, we have Brew and Bash. And then after that, like once you're involved, you go to different meetings, you go to retreats, you do like, there's so much. So it's not just school. You're not just simply focusing on school. Like you have to take advantage of the resources here and network because you only have 2 years here. And so you need to like really expand your network here and take advantage of everything. So you can really get lost in your extracurriculars. So, and again, the material goes by so fast. And by week two, like if by week three, you can have midterms. Like by week three, there's midterms. So it's crucial to start right off the bat, like first day, or even like, it doesn't have to be the first day, because the first day you'll see everyone like going up to the professor, shaking their hands, like, I'm Emily, my name's Rebecca, my name's Matthew. And more than half the times, because I've seen this, I've observed this, more than half of the times I've never seen them in office hours after that day. So be different and like, yes, greet the professor the first day if you want. But if they say, I will have office hours on Thursdays from 11 to 1, you should go. Even if it's the first week, then there's nobody there and then they'll actually remember you and then maybe come up with a few questions about them. There's like a whole like formula that I've like created and like honed because like I've did this in community college too. So yeah, it's just right off the bat, make those connections. I also sit front row. Like I sit front and center. Like if the podium is to the left, I will sit towards the left of the front row. Like I need to be visible. And again, I don't know. I think about this because professors, which one of my professors have actually told me for my computing class that like he can tell, and also my Psych 100A professor also said the same thing, that they can tell the students who are going to do well based on where they sit. So I'm just saying, if you sit front row, even if it's like weird, like you may be the only one front row, do it. Because honestly, it really helps. Honestly, you'll focus more instead of having to look at other people's computers to your left and to your right and in front of you. So yeah, that's just my thing. I've done that in all my classes. I sit front and center and I just, I participate as much as I can. So yeah.
I completely agree with you in that I'm also a front row sitter. And for me, it's actually less for visibility with the faculty member and more, but that's like an added benefit, I will say. For me, if I don't sit in the front or near the front, I get too distracted. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but if I sit in the back and I see someone on their computer or they're like on their phone and they're watching like a dog video, I'm like, ooh, that's cute. And I get so distracted. So for me to pay the most attention, I have to sit in the front. And then it has the byproduct of not only can like faculty members know that I'm paying attention and participating as much as I'm able to, it doesn't mean that I'm going to get called on every time. I hate being called on in class. It's like it stresses me out. I don't know if that makes anyone else nervous, but it really stresses me out. But at the same time, I feel like actively demonstrating that I'm paying attention and that I'm engaged and that I care. That in part of it is like not being distracted. Let's skip to talking about how, like you said, you have a formula. Tell me more about how you build relationships and rapport with faculty and TAs, and in what way is it different between faculty and TA?
So that's a good question. I think the approach is different. In terms of professors and how I approach them, I genuinely, like, I actually have questions for them in their research, like where they went to school. So simply just by like starting that conversation, like I've had one of my like professors show me like his lab assignments or something like that. Like when he did like, I don't know what he did, some science experiment. And he's like a computer science professor. So had nothing to really do with his like career, but he showed me videos of like what he was doing in like, grad school. So honestly, like again, they're humans. Like I know that it's a bit intimidating because like, okay, they have a PhD, they're a doctor, they're a faculty member at UCLA. But honestly, they want people to ask them questions about their research. They want people to ask them questions about life in general. And I think that's my approach with professors, is to ask questions about them and like why they chose this field. And I also go in the first day, like I always, or at least the first time I go to office hours, I ask, what's the best method of studying for this class? Because, and I tell them, and I'm like, look, I'm not the best test taker. So I want to know what's the best way to study for this class. And a lot of my psych classes have just been, a lot of the advice I got from my professors have just been like, if you're able to teach it to someone, you should be good. And I think that's the best way, because I would have wasted my time making flashcards. So I think coming in, asking questions on the best way to prepare for exams, because again, you'll have exams within the first 4 weeks of being there, is the best way to approach a professor. And again, asking about their life, and obviously not too personal, but like their academic career and why they chose the field that they're in right now. And as for TAs, I think it's a bit more different. It's a bit more like laid back. Similar questions, but I'll ask them like, oh, like, do you like being a TA here? Like, did you apply somewhere else? And like, what is your goal? Because I've had TAs where they're just simply doing it for hours. They don't want to be professors. Like they're doing it simply for hours, and they want to work for some tech startup. And I've had TAs where like, this is my dream. Like, I want to be a professor. Like, and you can just tell in the way they teach the difference. But just knowing like their background and having some common ground, I think that really connects you with them, and it'll make them remember you, because a lot of conversations that you see with other people and TAs and professors seem very transactional. And for me, I don't really like that. I like to actually build connections, because honestly, you never know. You may come in to UCLA thinking, I'm going to do this. And then you're hitting your senior year and like, actually, I don't want to do that. So the trajectory of your career in the way you view your life post grad can completely change. And letters of rec for grad school, for it could be for a company, like you want to build those connections, because you never know who you might need. And so it's great to like, with all your professors, just to like build those connections. And yeah, like I think that's the best way. And being genuine, like try not to be like fake about it, like actually care about what they have to say and listen, and come in with questions. And even if you don't have questions on the first day, it's fine, just ask them about like why they chose to be a professor. I think that's like interesting. Like I think being a professor is really cool, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of love for your field. So I think for me that's like interesting to ask.
That's so true. And I would say two bonus facts. Recently this summer, Mauricio and I were having a meeting with someone who wants to work with the Transfer Center this year. And maybe a spoiler alert, we're going to be working with him later this year. But he's a TA and a current graduate student. And he doesn't just want to teach college, he specifically wants to teach community college. And so he's like, I really want to connect more with transfers this year. And so you never know, like being able to introduce yourself and say like, hey, I'm a brand new transfer. I'm so excited to be at UCLA. You never know, you might have a TA or a faculty member that's like, I actually also teach at community college. That I actually had a faculty member in grad school here that was also teaching at community college, and he would very candidly say, I love teaching at community college. The students are so cool and engaged. And so that could be a great introduction as a transfer student. I've had a lot of faculty members tell me on campus that they prefer having transfer students in class. And the specific reason given, it was a labor studies faculty member, and he said like teaching labor studies, transfers are more likely to have had a job before. So they're better at engaging in labor studies classes because they understand what it means to work and to have a job and the different dynamics of having a job. And I think that that's a real bonus. But I think that if you're comfortable introducing yourself as a transfer, that opens the door to someone maybe telling you that they were also a transfer, or that they've also taught at community college, or they've taught at another institution, and to open that door to communication. And I think it's something that's also memorable, because I know that we all know that you all worked really, really hard to transfer to UCLA. And I think it's something that's very respected on campus. The other piece that I was going to say, oh, I had it and then I lost it. But in terms of building relationships, I think that something that people are sometimes nervous about or excited about is that UCLA is so research focused. So at UCLA, faculty members do typically have a lot of time spent doing their own research or writing, etc. And so I think that office hours is a great way to ask. They may or may not bring it up in their class. Totally getting the message my network is unstable. So if I drop, Emily, you just jump in. So I think that even on campus, I love to say birthplace of the internet, and here I am with unstable internet. But the TAs and faculty members, they're probably doing research. And if it's whether it's in the field that you're currently pursuing or a class you need to take for your major or as an elective, I think it's always helpful to learn about what someone is doing research in, because it might, like Emily was saying, it might unlock some kind of interest that you don't even realize that you have. And then additionally, I've seen people having conversations about research get opportunities to join those research labs. That is one of the top ways I've seen folks get into research labs, is going to talk to a professor, a TA. They say, oh, I'm doing research on genetics. I can't even come up with something right now, but genetics in mice. You're like, oh, wow, I'm really passionate about genetics. Do you have any openings in your lab group? If so, how do you typically add people to your lab? And sometimes they'll say, let's put you in. Let's just try it out. It happens more than you think. And then I had a close friend of mine who used to be a doctoral student here at UCLA, TA'd a bunch of psych classes. And while there was one point one of my staff members was looking for a lab position, I reached out to her and said, hey, are you taking anyone on? She's like, I'm not, but I know someone who is. Let me make a direct connection for them. So even if they're not the right fit, they'll probably ask you as well, what are you interested in? What are you hoping to do next? And that's a great time for you to say, actually, I'm really hoping to get research experience. Do you know anyone who's hiring for their lab? This is what I'm interested in. You never know how those conversations will then take you to that next step and get your foot in the door. What did we talked about grades, we talked about letters of rec, we talked about research. What did we miss? Anything? We have an outline, of course, of what we were going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just taking the time to, again, to get to know them. And you just never know. You really never know. Even if it's not for research, it could be like a professor could be like, oh yeah, my buddy who works at Google is actively looking for someone. You really never know. Like truly, you never know. And
that's true, because a lot of people, more than you would expect, have done career changes, and they may have even worked in another field.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you never know. And I can confidently say that my professors and TAs can at least say one thing about me. And again, I'm a very extroverted person, so like it comes out naturally, but I I think that's just the best way to go about it. I've maintained base all A's throughout the year, except for B and Psych 100B, because that class was really hard. But I got a B in that class. I got like a B plus. Like that's, and I know I had friends in that class who ended up getting a C. So and I wasn't locked in my room for like 20 hours studying. Like I also believe in like mental health and like taking care of yourself. So if you put in just the extra hour during your day to go to office hours and get things clarified so that you're not studying the wrong thing or approaching a question the wrong way, it will save you so much time in studying. And also, I go in to office hours with just feedback on homework assignments, just to double check if my answers are correct. And most of the times, if your answers are wrong, your professor or TA will literally tell you the right answer. So on top of that, you're getting like 100s on your assignments, which helps with your grade. So everything is kind of like a domino effect in a weird way. And yeah, that's all I have to say. And UCLA is notoriously known as like very hard school to get in with amazing faculty and a lot of people around you, were top of their class. And you'll notice that even though they're top of their class, like they're not going to office hours, and you might just end up doing better than them in the class simply just by going to office hours and building those connections. So yeah,
I know one more thing that you and I were talking about earlier that I wanted you to talk a little bit about is another thing you ask about in office hours is you ask for feedback. Do you ask for feedback on exams, homework, papers? What are you talking about?
All of the above. I everything.
Life.
I yeah, literally. I every class is different in terms of assignments. So for my coding class, I would send in a copy of my code. Like I would just copy and paste it, and I'd be like, "Can you help? Like, I'm stuck here. I'm getting error on this line." I'll ask for feedback that way. For my psych classes, a lot of the assignments were like handwritten, like summary like responses. So I would go and ask my professor, like, does this sound okay? Or like, like how should I approach this question? What's the best way to answer this prompt? And some other classes I've had, a lot of which were just like circle the best answer. And I'd just be like, is this right? Like, I'm not sure. Like, I'm stuck on these two. I'm stuck on A and D and how to answer this. So it's just seeing if your answers are correct. And most of the times they will literally just help you. Like they will just tell you the answer, like, oh, write this down. I've never had professors like shut me down and say, like, figure it out, or do you ask your classmates? Like I've never had a professor like that. Like all of them have literally told me the answers or guided me, or sometimes like when they can't tell you the answers because it could be like a potential exam question or something like that, they'll like drop hints. They're like, they'll try to like pick at your brain a little bit and be like, well, what do you think? Explain to me this. Like, and then they'll try to like get you to answer the question too. So again, it's maybe that's like my psych professors. So they try to like mess with your mind a little bit. But yeah, I just, yes, you can use your classmates. A lot of you guys will be on group meets and on different like discussion forums, but please go to your professors and TAs. Like they know more out of everyone. And if you get the okay from them, then you're good. So
I thought of one more situation, Emily, and this is from knowing you last year. And I think this is like a lot of people's worst nightmare. I know it's mine, which is group work. And not group work in general, oftentimes it's great, but when you're in a group and not everyone is equally pulling their share of like the project, am I onto something here? I feel like having a relationship with faculty, if you find yourself in that situation, I feel like it's probably more likely that faculty and TAs will sort of implicitly understand what's going on when you're the one showing up, you're answering the questions, or you're asking the questions and answering them, I guess. And you might not even have to say anything, but I think demonstrating your work ethic, demonstrating that you're showing up, you're trying, you're putting in this effort. When it comes down to those classes where you then have to rate your group or something like that, I think that that's another like benefit. Is that ringing true with one of your classes?
yeah, I actually took like a biology class in community college, and I had a group mate who got waitlisted from Stanford, got into UCLA, UCI. Like she was like super smart, but she was doing like dual enrollment in a weird way. Like she was going to UCI and then also taking classes at Saddleback, which is like a nearby community college. And she never showed up. Like she never put in the work. She'd only ask me for like the answers to the assignments, to lab assignments, and it was really frustrating because I was doing all the work, and she was like, "Well, I'm really busy with school at UCI." Like, and people come up with excuses like that as if like I don't have my own busy schedule. But my professor knew. I didn't have to say anything. He was like, "I already gave you the higher score." Like I already like professors now. They're very smart. And a lot of them, again, it's all pattern recognition. So they know who is trying and who's not. And so here at UCLA, I've came across, because I've been in a lot of groups, I've came across people who literally will not put in the work. And they will just simply try to use you for your answers. And yes, at UCLA, everyone's very willing to help you out, but also you need to stand your ground and not let people take advantage of you. And it's kind of hard because I'm personally like a people pleaser. Like I like to make people happy and I want people to like me, but also it comes to a point where like it's not fair if you do all the work and you let the other people just do whatever they want. So it's really important for professors to know who you are, and they'll know. They'll be able to tell by the work if it's you or if it's another person. And a lot of my classes, like I've had professors like ask, like in my coding class, we did group work, and like I literally talked to my professor about it because I got like close to my professor, like because I literally went to office hours like every day. And I was telling him like how I'm struggling so much. And he's like, well, why don't you have your group mates come into office hours? I'm like, they won't show up. And he's like, okay, you submit the homework yourself then. I'm like, okay. Like he told me to not even put my group mates' names down. So
Dang.
yeah, so yeah, professors know. And I think that if again, just there's so many benefits to going office hours, even if it's like an extra like hour every day, like it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Like I couldn't even preach it enough.
Yeah. And my final note, and then I'm gonna stop the recording because I know sometimes people are like a little bit nervous to ask questions when they know it's being recorded. But I think also something I've heard from a lot of incoming transfers is there are some opportunities early on, including like some research programs, et cetera, that are funded that you need to get like letters of recommendation for. And so the sooner you start forming those relationships, the easier it will be. That being said, always ask, can I use a reference, especially if it's in your first quarter and you're applying for something, ask if you can use your faculty from where you're transferring from, because a lot of times the answer is yes. But sometimes people assume that they can't possibly use like faculty from another institution. It depends on the program, but it's worth asking because you probably already have relationships coming into UCLA. But it's also important to start building those relationships right away when you get here. It'll just have so many benefits down the line. And so we just really want to encourage you to, start building those relationships right away with faculty. I'm going to pause this part.